Hi, I'm Yasmin, a wife and a proud new mom with a background in perinatal nursing. Welcome to Birth Unboxed, where we talk about all things birth, whether it's unassisted free birth, home birth with a midwife, or in a hospital. I believe every woman deserves the right to choose how and where she gives birth. I created this podcast to raise awareness so women can make informed choices and feel empowered in their births. By sharing stories and learning from one another, we can reclaim our power and become the ultimate authority in our own birthing experiences. Sisterhood is powerful, and I am so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hi, Erin. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Birth Unboxed podcast. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and where you are calling us from today?
Well, my name is Erin Brown, and I'm calling from Australia. I live in the state of Victoria in the city of Melbourne, and I am married to a man named Matthew, and we have 6 beautiful children, and my
Lovely.
6th one is here.
Hi.
Her name is Hope, and she is
And
9
she's a
weeks old.
fresh one. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you have a fresh story for us. So you have
Yes.
6 stories, which I love because we'll be able to talk a little bit about all of them, and you can explain to us the differences and similarities and what you liked or didn't like. So let's go way back to your
Yeah.
very first pregnancy. Tell us about how that very first experience was.
Well, I was 22 and I was on my own for a lot of the pregnancy, which was really hard, but that's okay. It was for the best, and I decided to go into obstetric care for that pregnancy because that's what my mum did and that's what she wanted me to do and to have. So I found an OB. I found, like the best OB that I could find, top of her game, and I started seeing her. And to be honest, like straight off the bat, I felt like she was very cold and clinical, good at what she did, but cold and clinical. So I didn't really like that about her. And that might have just been her personality, But I mean, she was good. She was fine. And the hospital was really nice. It was like brand new. And I was looking forward to birthing in a brand new hospital. But I was sort of alone in my pregnancy in terms of like emotionally, I was alone. And I had a really good group of friends at the time and they were quite supportive. But yeah, that was also just a bit fragmented in terms of, you've got lots of friends supporting you, but not like one really special close person supporting you. So, that was tricky. But when the big day finally came, I remember in the weeks leading up to having her name is Annabella. She's 16 now. I started watching some birth videos on YouTube. And this is in 2008, so like YouTube was, not that old yet, but people were already out there putting their birth videos up. So that was really cool. And I remember being like, whoa, the advice I'd been given from my mum and my godmother, it was the same advice. It was very simple advice. It was like, when you're ready to do a poo, that means that the baby's coming.
Yeah.
So basically. I was going into labor with like, pretty basic advice. Oh, I did go to the birth classes. But again, like I remember like going there with like a different friend each time because that, they were my support. And I remember just my friends and I kind of laughing about penises and vaginas, like it was a bit immature really. So I don't remember learning much from those classes.
That's fair. That's very fair.
So,
did you have an idea of what you wanted for that first birth, or was it just kind of like, I'm just gonna go to the hospital and they'll tell me what to do, like that's just how it goes?
I remember really just wanting to have a natural birth. I didn't want to have a cesarean if I could avoid it. And I do remember talking to my OB about that.
Okay.
But yeah, that was about it.
And in terms of pain management, did you have an idea?
Pain management. Yeah, no, you know what? I don't really even remember thinking about pain management. during that first labor. As I think, yeah, because there was sort of, I was really young. I was on my own. I don't think I think I was a bit immature, to be honest. And I just didn't consider any of those things. Yeah. I remember reading like heaps of books about pregnancy and about what was happening with my baby as it was growing. But I didn't focus on the labor and the birth so much. So when I did go into labor, I woke up at like 3:00 in the morning and I thought I had diarrhea. So I went to the toilet to go, and my waters broke. I was on the toilet and they just broke. And I just knew it was my waters. I knew it wasn't wee because I kind of felt this pressure and then this, involuntarily trickling. So I rang the midwife and she didn't believe me. She was like, oh, no, first baby, might not be, just stay at home. And I was like, oh, okay. But I knew it was because I had this rush of excitement, like this, which, I was like, game on, and and so the contractions actually started coming really, really hard and fast. There was no gentle lead into this labor. So I said to my birth partner who was there, it was actually Bella's dad at the time. We'd gotten back together just before she'd been born. So I said, I think we need to go. And so we hopped in the car and I'll never forget like putting my hand on the dashboard of the car and just breathing through these contractions. They were so intense and I wasn't prepared for that at all. I didn't, I think the older women in my life had kind of tried to guard me from the reality of the intensity of the pain. And so I was like, holy moly, they didn't tell me it was going to be like this, And so we got to the hospital and I remember kind of bursting in the doors to the reception area and falling on the floor, having a contraction. And I remember the receptionist trying to get me to do my paperwork, like while I was having a contraction.
Lovely.
I remember in my head thinking like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
What are you doing? So they brought a wheelchair out when they realized I was actually in labor and having proper contractions. They took me down to birth suite. And must have been like, it would have been an hour in by this stage. And they were still coming really fast and really hard. And I couldn't get comfortable. I tried hopping into the pool, the bath, but the water was just too hot. It felt too hot. I was hot. Yeah. And I remember, my birth partner got me the gas and was trying to help me use the gas. And I remember thinking and feeling, I need one of my girlfriends here. And I remember expressing that to him and he got quite upset at the thought of somebody else being at the birth, and so he didn't call them. And I remember just feeling like, oh, no, I really need them. But I didn't advocate for myself. I just got on with the birth. And then I felt like I needed to do a poo. Yeah. And then, so I went to the bathroom and I thought, I must be getting close because this is what my mum and my godmother said, And so I asked the midwife. I had this cranky old midwife. Sorry, I'm just feeding her. Okay. This cranky old midwife. And I said, can you check me? And so she checked me and she said, you're 5 centimeters. And I would have been in labor for about 2 hours by this stage.
Okay, wow.
And it was progressing really quickly. And I said, 5 centimeters. Oh, great. Considering I was really needing to go to the toilet, I actually think I may have been a bit further along. But anyway, and I said, oh, cool,
it's quite
great.
Subjective.
We're halfway there. It is subjective, yeah. And I said, how much longer do you think I have? And she goes, this is your first baby. You'll be here for another 10 hours. at least. And I was like, what? Another 10 hours of this? And I remember feeling so discouraged.
Aw.
And then, so I kept laboring on. And then all of a sudden, I just felt like I couldn't do it anymore. And the pain was so overwhelming. And they were just wave after wave. And I remember crying out and saying, I want the epidural. I want an epidural. And so they went and got me an epidural. And I had an epidural. And I had the epidural. Everything calmed down, obviously. And then she was born about an hour later.
Nah.
Yeah, I didn't know, but I was obviously in transition.
You were already really close,
And
yeah?
so she was born at, yeah. She was born at 9:16. So I went into labor at 3 in the morning and she was born at 9:16. So yeah, it was
nice.
a 5-hour labor.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, after Bella, you went on to have 5 more children. So, tell us, like, pick out anything significant. Obviously, they're all significant and beautiful in their own ways. But if there's anything that you think really stood out from any of those compared to your very last one, and then take us to your last one, which must be very fresh in your mind because it happened 9 weeks ago.
Yeah. I think, I mean, what stood out to me from Bella's birth actually was that once I'd had the epidural and then she came really quickly afterwards, I actually felt really upset that I'd had the epidural.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'd really wanted to have a natural, like a fully natural birth. I hadn't wanted to have an epidural. And I remember feeling like my birth had been robbed from me.
Yeah.
And I felt really upset at myself that I hadn't been able to cope. And so even though like the birth went really well, she was really healthy and beautiful. We had kangaroo care afterwards. It was just really, really beautiful. But yeah, I did feel really disappointed.
Do you feel like if you had had more support at the end when you were getting so close that you could have pushed through, but they were just like, oh yeah, you want an epidural? Sure, let's get that for you. And yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And like the fact that I recognized like before I hit transition that I wanted one of my female friends there. Like I needed that female support and not just the midwife who, you know, I didn't really click with.
Yeah.
Like someone I felt safe with and comfortable with. And, you know, I think that would have made a difference. And yeah, they would have been able to help me, coach me through that last period. Yeah. So I think, yeah. But, you know, fast forward to Timothy, my little boy. So Bella was 8.5 when he was born. So, and I'm married by this stage, and we conceived this little baby. And throughout my pregnancy, I kind of refreshed. Oh, hang on, no, let me just tell you something. After Bella was born, that feeling of my robbed birth, I actually came across Sarah Buckley's book, Gentle Birth, Gentle Mothering. And I had been introduced to the concept of home birth in that book. And I remember saying to my husband, oh, I'd really love to home birth. And he was like, what? And so we had this discussion about home birth. But he was not on board at all. And so I respected that and went, okay, we happen to live just down the road from the best hospital in Melbourne at the time, the Royal Women's Hospital. So we were both like, okay, yep, Royal Women's Hospital, let's do it. We'll get the best care in the state, you know. So we went there, and it was the public health system. So the public health system is incredibly fragmented. Obviously, you don't have continuity of care. It was, my pregnancy was really good. I was healthy. Baby was healthy. But I remember getting to the end of my pregnancy, and they wanted to do some scans and stuff. And they told me that my baby was growth restricted. And I was enormous, Yasmin. Like, I was so big. There was no way this baby was growth restricted. But I did have a lot of pressure on me from about 38 weeks to get induced. And Bella had come at 39 weeks. Like, I really just wanted to go into labor naturally. If I had a birth plan, it was, once again, go into labor naturally, have a natural labor. That was my aim. And I did prepare a little bit more during that pregnancy for the pain. So looking at breathing and positions and moving around and water therapy if it felt good during that labor. And obviously I had Matt on board and, you know, tried to teach him as much as possible that you're going to need to support me through this labor and try and get me through these pointy bits.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, I was lots of pressure to induce, which was really annoying, and I really pushed back on it. And I actually remember they did convince me to do it, and they booked me in, and I got all the way into the hospital, and then I was in the hospital room about to be induced, and I turned to the staff and said, I don't want to be here. I don't want to get induced. I'm going home.
I love it. I love that.
So, yeah, that was at 39 weeks. And then he got all the way up to 41 weeks plus 6 days.
Wow, that's amazing.
So he stayed in for as long as he possibly
would not
could.
speak up. So good on you for listening to your instinct.
Yeah, yeah, they're really pushy. It's really hard to say no to them because they make you feel afraid. They tell you things like, oh, here's all the risks if your baby is small and growth restricted. And so you end up just becoming highly anxious and fearful that you're going to kill your baby through birth, that you're a bad mother, and that and it makes you doubt your own instincts. Like, I knew my baby was fine.
Yeah. They don't tell you that these scans are not accurate. So a lot of women they're given that information thinking that, oh no, it's 100%. They're able to really tell me what the weight of my baby is.
Yeah, and a different sonographer can give you a different outcome, which is what I ended up, because they were putting pressure on me, I ended up going to a different sonographer, the same sonographer I had seen when he was 20 weeks old in utero, and he did a scan at 40 plus something weeks and said, your baby's fine. Your baby's fine. It's not growth restricted.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so Timmy went to 41 weeks plus 6 days. And I was going a bit insane, to be honest, by then, but I was, really committed to letting him come out when he wanted to.
Yeah.
And I woke up at, it was around a similar time to Bella. I think it was about 4:30 in the morning. Same scenario. I had cramps. And I knew this time I was like, I'm going into labor. So I got up and I walked around a little bit, and then I lay back down again and just tried to get comfortable, but I couldn't. So I went and hopped into the bath, and I just loved being in the bath at home. It was so beautiful. And my contractions were coming, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 in 10, but, really manageable. And I remember before I hopped into the bath, I did notice my waters had broken a little bit, but it wasn't, it wasn't as much as with Annabella. It was just sort of like a really gentle trickle.
With Annabella, was the waters the very first thing?
Pardon?
With Bella, the waters? Or did you have cramping before?
I had cramping and then got up because of the cramping. And when I was at the toilet, my waters broke.
Right, so you thought it was a tummy ache,
noticeable.
but it was already the cramping. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd had Indian for dinner the night before,
Uh,
and so I just thought that it was curry.
yeah, yeah. Well, they say spicy food helps.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, so same cramping, and yeah, and I loved the bath. And my mother-in-law and father-in-law came over um, to be with my daughter. Um, and I remember my mother-in-law coming into the bathroom, and I just felt this like rush of peace. It was so nice. It was
Oh,
so special. And she sat there with me through each contraction, and I was so happy. I was so happy.
I love that.
Um, and my hubby was really anxious. Yeah, he was just really anxious. I could see he was sort of like, oh, we gotta go, we gotta go, gotta go. And I was like, no, I just want to stay here. I just want to stay in the bath. And he could see they were progressing and they were getting stronger. And so he was like, no, we gotta go now. We gotta get to the hospital. And I really did not want to get out of that bathtub, I can tell you. But I
yeah.
did. I got up and I got out of the bathtub, and the pain, like the experience of pain, just went from, like a 50 to 100 in an
Oh,
instant.
yeah, yeah.
I remember kind of clambering up the stairs. Yeah,
Mm,
to get to the car, and I remember getting in
yeah.
the car and just being in so much pain. Um, and I put my worship music on, which was really beautiful. And actually, the first song that came on was the song that I had been singing to Timothy throughout my pregnancy.
Oh,
So that was special. Like, I had that kind of special God moment there on the way to the hospital. But I remember getting to the hospital, and once again, like, everyone's trying to talk to you and trying to get you to fill out paperwork, and you're just like, shut up. Just remember feeling really
yeah,
exposed and vulnerable.
yeah.
And I was in my nightgown, and yeah, having these contractions in the waiting room, and
Oh,
a midwife came and got me and took me upstairs to birth suite, and everything just went really, really south, to be honest.
yeah.
I think I was in such a lot of pain, and things like, I remember with Bella feeling like things were progressing, if that makes sense. But with Timothy, it felt like I wasn't getting anywhere.
Mm,
And I came into birth suite, I think it would have been around 10 o'clock in the morning by this stage. So I've been laboring since about 4:30. And my expectation was that it would go really similarly to Bella's birth. Like, it would be about 5 hours, and,
yeah.
but I kind of knew that that wasn't happening, and I couldn't get comfortable. There was nothing that was soothing me. I remember Matt tried to like touch my skin, and it felt like sandpaper. When he tried to touch my skin, it was like sandpaper was clawing down my back.
Oh,
And all of a sudden there was like this overwhelming feeling beyond the contractions. Like, in my hips, I felt like my hips were breaking. It was so painful. It was more painful than the actual contractions themselves. And I remember writhing around and trying to get out of this pain. And it didn't feel like any of my techniques that I'd, practiced or stored up in my memory bank were helping. And I got down on all fours and tried wriggling around in all fours. And then I experienced coupling. So I was just getting one contraction on top of another and wasn't getting any breaks. I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know about that. So that kind of took me out by surprise as well. The midwives were really lovely. I had two young student midwives. Oh, no, sorry.
okay.
I had a really young midwife and then a student midwife with the other one. And they were really nice, and they really were trying to help. But I remember getting to that same point of, I can't go on. I'm stuck in this.
Yeah.
What is this? I'm not getting any breaks. And I remember crying out for an epidural again at that point. So they organized me to have an epidural, and I actually remember feeling thankful for it this time because um, I was, yeah, it felt like I was stuck in transition
Did they
with
check you at this point?
coupling. Yeah. Oh, sorry. That's a good
It's
question. They
okay.
did check me, and I was in transition, and but I had a cervical lip, and
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I remember they checked me, and they're like, "Oh, you're really far along. Oh, you have a cervical lip. Okay, well, let's just see what happens." And then that's when it felt like I was stuck in transition, and I started getting
Oh.
um,
And you
like
were
the
still
coupling
able to get your
started.
epidural
Um,
that far along.
yeah, which what I know about epidurals now, they wouldn't normally administer it when
Yeah,
you're
usually.
in
Yeah.
transition.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe, I mean, I don't know what the time periods were here. Like maybe I had actually been in that state for quite a while, and they were
Mm-hmm.
feeling enormous compassion for me or something. I'm not really sure. I remember once they called the anesthetist. He was straight in. I didn't have to wait for very long at all. Um,
Nice.
so that was actually a real blessing. And then yeah, so I got my epidural, and um, I had some food, and not long after that, they said, "Look, why don't we just start pushing, and we'll put our um, hand inside you and try and move that cervical lip." So we started pushing, and I got really sick during the pushing stage and was like really nauseous, and it was it's a bit of a gross stage, I suppose you could say.
Oh,
Um,
sounds rough.
but we got there. It did take quite a while. You know, I remember Annabella's pushing stage was only about 15 minutes. Timmy's pushing stage was a good hour and a bit. And so I gave birth to my beautiful baby boy at 3:30 in the afternoon. He was enormous. He was 4.3 kilos.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that is in pounds. And he had the really elongated head.
Yeah.
Um, so he was kind of stuck down there for quite some time, it seems.
Yeah.
Um, I remember them bringing him up to me and putting him on my chest and just being like completely exhausted and looking at him going, "Hi."
Yeah.
That was really hard work, Tim.
Yeah. I'll talk to you later. I need a
Yeah,
moment.
totally. Like,
Yeah.
Mama needs a nap.
Yeah.
Yeah, once again, I felt that after his birth, I felt disappointed that I hadn't been able to push him out without an epidural. I felt upset that I didn't really understand what was going on in my body. That was really hard
Yeah.
to yeah. But I mean, that's pretty common in birth. Things pop up that you don't know about. So
Mm-hmm.
but it took me a little time to kind of process and recover from that because it was just yeah, the pain once again was so overwhelming, and I didn't have the tools or resources to cope
Mm-hmm.
with it. Um, and neither did Matt. Like Matt sort of had no idea, especially when I was in that more wild kind of state of
Yeah.
transition, and I was there for quite some time, and I'm screaming and
Yeah.
writhing around and carrying on in that like really primitive mindset. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it threw him a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Um, yeah. So, but we had our beautiful baby boy, and he was healthy and strong and, yeah, enormous and not growth restricted. He wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, fast forward to um, 2019 now. Yeah, so Bella was 2008, Timmy was 2017, Mercy 2019. I remember this time being desiring to be very prepared for anything. So I read and read and read and got as well informed as I possibly could about everything birth,
Yeah.
um, and everything pain management related. Um, I didn't include Matt in this so much. It was just me. I really wanted to do it myself this time
Yeah.
around. I remember thinking, I can do this. I'm going to do this. And I read Juju, what's her name? Juju something or other's birth skills book. And then I read Ina May Gaskin's Guide to Childbirth.
Yeah.
And I read like countless things on the internet, other women's stories and just general information. And I decided I'm a singer, and so I decided that my main tool was going to be vocalization, and I was just going to let it raw. And so Mercy, I had an OB this time. So after my experience at the hospital with all the fragmented care, I decided that I wanted continuity of care. And my parents, once again, were like, oh, you must get the best OB you can find. And I was like, okay, sure. So I went around. A midwife friend of mine worked at a private hospital. And so I just asked her who she would recommend. And so I went with an OB there. Once again, like it was nice, but I don't know. She was good, but I didn't love her. But whatever, I went along to my appointments and she was just a bit proud.
Okay.
There was a lack of humility with her, which I didn't like.
Yeah.
And I went along, but she was very pro-natural birth, and I said that, I want to birth this baby naturally. I don't want an epidural this time. I really want to get through it. I want to know that I can get through it, So she was really pro-natural birth and positive about that.
That's good.
Yeah, I made it very clear that I wanted to avoid having a cesarean unless it was really necessary. And she was supportive of that too. So Mercy, I went into labor with Mercy, similar again to Bella and Tim. I woke up around 4:00 in the morning with cramps. And once again, I knew it was game on. And I got up and once I couldn't lie down in bed anymore because the pain was, getting too uncomfortable, I hopped up and just started making Bella and Tim some breakfast and walking up and down the hallway and, going to the bathroom when I needed. And my parents were visiting this time, so they came over and took Bella to school and took Timothy. Matt and I were just alone at home, and it was really nice, actually. So it would have been around 9:00. Yeah, it was really it was really him and I, and he knew all my birth preferences, knew that I wanted to just let my body do its thing and, have a natural birth. And we just watched a bit of telly, and then my contractions started slowing down a bit, so I got up and started moving around to try and kick them off a bit more. My waters hadn't broken at all.
Okay, so that was different.
So yeah, that was the different thing, and I think that's why they probably started slowing down a little bit. So I got up and started walking around, and I remember really not wanting to break. I didn't want to break my waters. I wanted my body to just labor naturally. I didn't want any interference or interventions at all. So eventually I was like, well, maybe we should go to hospital because my waters could break, and we know that my labors tend to get a bit fast and hard. So why don't we go? So we went to hospital, and on the way to hospital, my labor completely stalled. And that was really disappointing. And we got there and I started walking around the hospital. It would have been about lunchtime, and trying to get them to kick off again, and they didn't. Had some food, hung out in birth suite. I think we were watching like The Office or something, just trying to relax. Nothing happened.
How many weeks for you?
Yeah, I was a bit annoyed. 41 plus 3.
Okay.
Yeah. And my OB came in and she said, we're gonna have to send you home. And I was like, I don't want to go home because the hospital was almost an hour away from home. And I was like, what's the point of going home? Like, clearly this
Yeah.
clearly this is going to happen, in the next 24 hours. Like, why send me home?
Yeah.
She was like, well, yeah, no, that's what we're going to do. Too bad, you've got to go home, or I can break your waters. And I was like, I don't want to break my waters. And she was like, well, if we break your waters, baby's going to be here within, a couple of hours. I was like, okay, all right, well, all right, let's break my waters then. So she broke my waters at 2:30, and labor came on fast and hard.
Yeah.
And I, yeah. And I remember just holding on to Matthew's arms, like, because he's so big, he's like 6 foot something, and he's got these giant arms. And I remember holding onto his arms and just like moaning in his face like a cow. and he was so strong, and it was actually really comforting, and I love that moment. I love that memory that I have there. And it got to the point though where I wanted something else, so I moved into the shower, and I just had that warm trickling water on my back, and it was so relaxing and soothing. And I remember being in there and moaning through the contractions again in the shower. And like, I remember fixating on a spot on the wall, like looking at the grout, and just concentrating on that grout, and counting in my head through the contractions as well.
Were you using your vocalizations, the singing at this time?
Yeah, I was really, really loud.
Yeah.
I'm quite loud by nature, so it was pretty loud. And and then it came time to do a poo. Like, that time came. And so I remember going to the toilet and sitting down. I remember the midwife popping her head in and being like, do you need to do a poo? And I remember like, no. I don't know why I said no. But I said no, and she was like, oh, okay, all right. And I went back to the shower. I don't know why. I just wanted to be alone. I didn't want anyone interrupting me.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. That makes sense. But was it a midwife or was it the OB? Because this time you went with the OB, right?
No, it was the midwife.
Okay,
well,
so
the OBs leave. They come in, they break your waters, and then they're like, oh, we'll be back in an hour.
And then you'll have the midwife still be part of your care. Okay.
Yeah. So it was just the midwife at this stage, and she came in, and but I went back to the shower, and I really wanted to be alone. I didn't want anyone around me, to be honest. And I'm a private pooer anyway in my everyday life.
Right.
I don't want anyone around me, especially when I'm in labor,
Yes.
And then I remember feeling like this pressure on my, down there, this pressure. And I also remember feeling like getting to that transition stage of, this is not working anymore. Oh my gosh, what is this pain? This hurts. And I just started screaming, to be honest, like really crazy screaming. It wasn't even moaning anymore, or it was screaming. And I said, I want the epidural. I want the epidural. And Matt was like, Erin, you don't want the epidural.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do. I want the epidural.
And do you know how far along you were at this point?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't have any checks.
Okay.
I'd say I was very far along. The OB popped her head in and said, oh, do you think it's soon, to the midwife? And the midwife said, nah. And she said, oh, okay. And so she left. And an important part of this story actually is that the OB, I didn't love her. And I remember praying on my way to the hospital and saying, Lord, I don't really like her. I don't really want her at my birth. Yeah. Could you just not have her there? And so anyway, the midwife was like, oh, are you sure you want the epidural? And I said, yeah, I want the epidural. She was like, but you said you didn't want it. I was like, no, I really want it. And so the anaesthetist came in, and then I stood up off the bed because I couldn't sit down on the bed anymore because I felt this pressure there. I stood up, and Mercy's head just popped out. And,
Wow.
I'll never forget Matthew. Matthew was like, how did you not know he was there?
Wow, hilarious.
Mercy's head popped out and I started screaming, her head, the head, the head. And then I experienced the fetal ejection reflex and she just flew out.
So while you were
She
still
flew
standing?
out onto the bed. Yeah, while I was standing.
Yeah. Wow.
I was standing up and she flew out onto the bed. And yeah, she came out blue. Like it was all, I think it was a bit much for her. And the anaesthetist, the poor anaesthetist, like he went really pale apparently.
That's probably the first birth he actually saw.
It was the first birth other than his wife's that he'd ever seen. So the poor guy. But yeah. So that was good. That was fun. And I do remember I was a little bit hypervolemic afterwards, so I kind of started shaking and you know, I think it was the actual pushing / birth part, it was just so quick. And but I'm really glad I listened to my instinct that time. I'm glad I didn't tell them that I needed to do a poo. I'm glad that I just was alone and doing my thing. And then I came into transition fairly quickly, I think, and that's when I was all wild and out of control. But then she was there like 10 or 15 minutes later, so it was a fairly, quick process, really.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you because my dog is whining. I'm just going to go open the door for him.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, go for it. No worries. Yeah, Mercy shot out, and that was her birth. And, I remember feeling so triumphant.
In that case, the midwife, like, run in, grab her, put her on your chest, or were you able to, like, just take her yourself?
No, the midwife got her. I remember, so Matthew was actually holding me when I stood up and birthed her. And the midwife got her.
Okay.
And cleaned her up. But she was still attached to me, obviously, with the cord. So I can't remember what happened. I just remember looking down and at my blue baby and being like, what? Like
that was fast.
I was in a bit of shock, I think.
Yeah.
But to be fair, like that was the first time I had experienced the pushing phase without an epidural.
Yeah.
So, and I was determined to do it without the epidural, like right up until that last bit.
Yeah. When you were really in transition.
And so, and the pressure was so great. Like I hadn't experienced that pressure or that pushing feeling before. I didn't really know. Yeah.
How many hours?
And I was
this
sort
labor?
Of from when she broke my waters, it was 2 hours.
Okay.
So she broke the waters at 2:30 and Mercy was born at 4:30.
Okay. But you started having the contractions at home overnight.
Yeah, at 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
So I woke 4 o'clock. It was 4 o'clock. So I woke up at 4 and then she was born at 4:30.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but that last bit, the intense part was 2 hours. And it was intense for that whole 2 hours and, really ramping up for that last half an hour, I suppose it probably was. So I remember afterwards thinking, gosh, that pushing phase was so cool. Like, my body just did it. It was involuntary,
Yeah.
I couldn't help but push her out, And I remember being, because I'd read about that, but I just remember being amazed by it and just, really in awe of that process. And how, there is no way that baby can stay in. Like you cannot not push that baby out.
Yeah.
And yeah, Matt teased me for quite some time after that. He was like, how did you not know?
Well, you were
But it
feeling a
was
bit
really
of the
nice. Like,
pressure,
it
right?
was,
But given your last birth, you were pushing for so long. You were like, it's probably going to be a while still.
yeah, totally. That's what I thought. I thought, oh, I'm not there,
Yeah. And it was the first time without
I've
an
got ages to
epidural,
go.
too. So the feeling was different, right? The sensation.
Oh, yeah. Because when you have an epidural, you are coached to push.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be because you can't feel anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this was not coached at all. And yeah, my body was just pushing it. And I remember when I was sitting on the edge of the bed, like when the anaesthetist came in, because the anaesthetist comes in and they make you sit on the bed. And I remember popping up because I said to him, I can't sit down. I can't sit down. And yeah, it was after that her head popped out.
Yeah, I love it.
And I think, yeah, I was just in a bit of denial about what was going on, obviously. But so thankful for that because that was the outcome I'd really hoped for.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
prayed for.
Yeah.
And the OB was not there,
Yeah.
which I was also really thankful for.
Mm-hmm.
And the midwife I had, she was beautiful, and I was thankful for her calm presence in the room.
Good.
She was a calm presence, and
that's good.
Yeah, she was beautiful. And so yeah, and I remember feeling very triumphant after I had Mercy. I felt like I was like a boss lady. Like if I can do that, I can do anything.
Yeah.
And remember thinking like, well, I don't want to do that again, too soon, but I want to do that again. You know? And then so Mercy was 9 months old when we conceived Joy. And I remember thinking, whoa, this is actually quite soon, but never mind. Joy was a bit of a surprise. And Joy, I noticed from the moment I was pregnant with Joy that my tummy was significantly smaller than it had been with my other babies. Mercy was 4.4 kilos.
Oh.
So I had another big baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just noticed throughout this pregnancy that my tummy was smaller.
Just a quick question.
So,
since the last two babies were on the bigger side, did you have any differences in terms of tearing from the coached pushing versus the uncoached natural reflex?
Oh, yeah. So Annabella, I had tearing, not perineum tearing, like internal tearing.
Okay.
Timothy, I had a little bit of tearing on my labia. And Mercy, I did have some tearing. She had a really big head. So I had not perineum tearing again, but I did have, I can't quite remember where it was, but I had quite a few stitches with Mercy. Okay. And I was sore with her for longer. Yeah. But I think that she had a very big head. Yeah. And I think that's probably what it was. Yeah.
And you flew out too, so it didn't really give your body time to stretch.
No. Yeah, and I was standing, so that would have, made her come out quicker as well. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of walked around like a cowboy for quite a while after I had Mercy, for about a week. Yeah, I remember noticing early that I was smaller, which was somewhat of a gift because having the big babies and being so big was hard to move around. And this was the pandemic, so this was 2020. It was a weird time. I didn't want to go back. Oh no, my private health cover had I'd forgotten to pay it, and so it had actually cancelled. So I didn't have private health. So I decided to go back to the public system. The pandemic appointments were really awkward. They were trying to keep people out of the hospitals. So a lot of the appointments were over the phone. And it wasn't until much later in my pregnancy that I went into the hospital. And I remember them saying, we need to give you a scan. So I had a scan. And they picked up that my baby was significantly smaller than my other babies. And this was around 32 weeks. Yeah, they started talking to me about inducing me early, to have my baby early, which I didn't really want to do. But it was the pandemic, and I was scared. And so, yeah, I kind of was convinced to have an induction at 37 weeks.
Okay.
I remember waking up on the morning of it and I couldn't sleep and was really anxious, but that's okay. We went to the hospital and they broke my waters, but I wasn't ready to go into labor, so it did not kickstart labor. I had the Syntocin and it did not kickstart labor.
Which, for those of you listening in North America, we call it oxytocin or pitocin.
Oh, you call it? That's
pitocin.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'd been in birth suite from like 8 o'clock in the morning, and nothing was happening. And I think around 1 o'clock, they really amped up the Syntocin. No, it was 1:30, because she was born at 2:30. So they amped up the Syntocin, and it put me into a really intense hour of full-on labor.
Yeah.
Lots of coupling. It was 56 minutes is what they wrote down. So it was 56 minutes of very intense labor, but she was out, thankfully, after 56 minutes.
Wow.
And I remember when I had woken up in the morning anxious, thinking about, the fact that with all my babies, when they'd come out and, you get given the baby, I'd never experienced that joy that the mothers talk about. And I remember thinking and praying, like, I really want to experience that. I really want to experience that joy that women talk about when their babies get put on their chests, because I've never had that. And at my last appointment with the hospital before my induction, I had spoken to this obstetrician, and I'd also expressed to her my desire to like birth my baby and have my baby like put straight onto my chest, like to lift her up and onto my chest. And this OB's name was Maddie, and Maddie had heard that I was in labor, and she came like bursting into the door about 5 minutes before Joy was born. And I remember looking down at her, and I remember her looking at me and saying, "Erin, are you ready to catch your baby?"
Aww.
And I was upright on a bed, like on the beds. And I was leaning. They'd put the back of the bed upright, so the bed was sort of working like a chair almost. So I was leaning over the bed, and my knees were supported on the soft mattress. And Maddie, as I was birthing Joy, guided her up onto my chest.
Aww.
And when she did that, my heart literally exploded with joy. Aww. It was so beautiful. Yeah, it was one of my favorite birth experiences, actually.
I love that.
Yeah, it was really special. Yeah, it was. I was so thankful for that, and really thankful for Maddie, and just the timing of it, like she happened to be on that day on that shift and happened to hear that I was in labor and came running in to give me that birth experience that I really wanted.
It makes such a difference when you have a provider that really cares and listens and, goes above and beyond, not even above and beyond. I think it's their job to also focus on that aspect of things. But it's so sweet when you have one that listens and tries to respect that. And I love that you touched on that aspect of not feeling that joy with the other babies as soon as they were born, because it does happen a lot of the time, and a lot of women feel like, oh, why didn't I feel that? Like it's not for everybody.
Yeah, what's wrong with me?
Yeah, like it needs to be the perfect cocktail of things for you to really feel it, and sometimes things are just not in the right way, and you're not going to feel it, and you're going to be questioning it, but it does happen a lot. And and it was your fourth time. That's when you felt it. Yeah, it was my fourth baby, and so it doesn't always happen. And I think maybe especially in your first and maybe seconds, just because it is your first time and everything's so new and intense,
And so, yeah, I felt really thankful for that. And it was a beautiful experience. Even though it was an induction and it was kind of surrounded by a lot of anxiety and fear because when they tell you that your baby is little and all the problems that can come with that, that's, not great. But the actual, that part of it was really beautiful.
And what was her weight?
And she was little. She was 2.4. 2.4 kilos. I don't know what that is in pounds. I know you guys do pounds, but
well, we actually do kilos in the hospital as well, but you said 2.4, okay. So 5.2 pounds.
Yeah, so Joy was like half their weight, really.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was. I was like, oh my gosh, she's so tiny. I don't know what to do with this baby.
None of Mercy's clothes fit her right when she was born.
Not for ages. Not for like a couple of months.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. In hindsight, like I would probably trust my body to grow that baby for a bit longer. I'd probably, if I could go back in time, I wouldn't have taken her out at that point in time. Yeah, I would have left her in. But that's just because I know more now. Yeah, I've done a lot more reading and just educating myself, and but that's okay. Like I was thankful. I'm still thankful for that OB and the care she showed me. And funnily enough, I actually had her for 3 appointments in a row in the lead up to Joy's birth, which I was so grateful for as well, because it was kind of a form of a continuity of care in the public system. And she was so sweet and kind and really listened to me. Yeah, the first time I felt like cared for on multiple levels. Like my last OB had listened to me, but she wasn't particularly nice. This OB was really lovely, really listened to me, and I felt cared for by her.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Birth Unboxed. If you've enjoyed today's conversation and want to hear more, please consider subscribing to the podcast so you never miss an episode and leaving a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts or even your own birth stories, so feel free to connect with me via Instagram at thebirthunboxed.podcast or through my website linked in the show notes. Until next time, friends.